মানে মুডতে গৰম হৈ যায় এনেকুৱা কম্প্ৰমাইজিং কথাবিলাক শুনিলে সেই শব্দটো মোৰ খুব মানে ভাল লাগে এডৰ থুলুক এটা মূৰত উঠি যায় মানে বিষ্ণু ৰাভাৰ সেইটো মানে হোৱা উচিত মানে সেইটো বহুতৰ নহয় আজিকালি
নাই আজি আৰু তাৰমানে সেইটো আৰু আজি হাইব্ৰিড সংস্কৃতিত সেই অৰ্গেনিক কোৱালিটিটো বিচাৰি পোৱাটো বৰ টান
আমি অখিল গগৈ আৰু বিষ্ণু ৰাভা আমি মানে কম্পেয়াৰ কৰিব নোৱাৰো
নহয় তাৰমানে দুটা কথা মানে আপুনি হয়তো অৰূপ শইকীয়া ছাৰ পঢ়িছে চেঞ্চুৰিজ অফ প্ৰটেষ্ট ৰুটলেজৰ কথাটো হৈছে কি মানে মই এই কথাটো ক'ব খোজা নাই যে পেৰেলেল ড্ৰ কৰিব মই কোনো কাৰণতে খোজা নাই কিন্তু ধৰক এটা কথা এটা আছে যে মানে অখিল গগৈৰ যথেষ্ট ভুল ভ্ৰান্তি মানে দুখ ত্ৰুটি অজস্ৰ আছে যিবিলাকক লৈ আমি সাংঘাতিক ধৰণে ক্ৰিটিকেল আমি কেতিয়াও ক'ব খোজা নাই যে তেওঁ একেবাৰে অসমীয়া জাতি মানে কেইদিনমানৰ আগতে আজি লোকনাথ গোস্বামী ছাৰৰ সেই কথাটো ৰাতিপুৱা শ্বেয়াৰ কৰিলে ময়ো সেই কথাটো মানে ময়ো পঢ়িছো সেই লিখাটো এজন অসমৰ আগশাৰীৰ নিবন্ধকাৰে লিখিছে বাতৰি কাকতত যে ভুলবশতঃ হেনো বিষ্ণু ৰাভাক জেলত ভৰোৱা হৈছিল 1962 চনত চাইনা আক্ৰমণৰ পাছত গতিকে এই ধৰণৰ কথা মানে যে ভুলবশতঃ এই মানে অখিল গগৈ মই পেৰেলেল এইখিনিত আমি ড্ৰ কৰিব পাৰো যে অখিল গগৈ যিটো পদ্ধতিৰে দেশত বহি সজোৱা হৈছে একেটা পদ্ধতিৰে সজোৱা হৈছিল
এইটোতো আপুনি যিটো পদ্ধতিৰে তেওঁ জেললৈ দিয়া হৈছে এইটোতো আপুনি কোনো পধ্যে সাপোৰ্ট কৰিব নোৱাৰে ন
এক্সেক্টলি
হিউমেন অমানসিক ধৰণৰ কথা হৈ গৈছে আৰু তেওঁলোকে ভয় কৰা নাই ইভেন মানে বিধানসভাত তেওঁ পাগল বুলি কৈ দিছে
এক্সেক্টলি মই সেই পইণ্টে পেৰেলেল এটা ড্ৰ কৰিব বিচাৰিছো
থাকি যাব এই সময়ত তেওঁক মানে অসমৰ বিধানসভা মজিয়াত তেওঁক পাগল বুলি কোৱা হ'ল মুখ্যমন্ত্ৰীৰ জৰিয়তে সেই কথাটোতো মানে ইতিহাসত
থাকি যাব অফকোৰ্স থাকি যাব
আমাৰ কথা আমি কওঁ যে চুচুৰাই নিলে তেওঁলোকে সেই কথাটো বুজি পোৱা নাই যে তেওঁলোকে হিষ্ট্ৰীত কেনেকে থাকি যাব কাৰণ এজন পলিটিকেল পাৰ্চনৰ জীৱনৰ আয়ুস 20 বছৰ হ'ব পাৰে তেওঁতো আৰু 20 বছৰ পিছত ৰাজনীতিত প্ৰাসংগিক হৈ নাথাকিব নহয় জানো কথাবিলাক চাম যে অখিল গগৈ আন্দোলনটো যেতিয়া চাব তেতিয়া মানে কোৱা হ'ব যে হিমন্ত বিশ্ব শৰ্মাই এছেম্বলিত এনেকে কওঁতে বিধায়কসকলে মৌনতা অৱলম্বন কৰিছিল নহয় জানো
এক্সেক্টলি
আমিতো
আৰু ইতিহাসক আৰু ফাঁকি দিয়াটো সেইটো সম্ভৱপৰ কোনো কাৰণতে নহয়
একেবাৰে মানুহে সমসাময়িক সময়টো জীয়াই থাকিব খোজে ভৱিষ্যতকালত জীয়াই থাকিব লাগে
ভাল লাগিল বাইদেউ কথা পাতি আপোনাৰ পেপাৰখন নিশ্চয় ইণ্টাৰেষ্টিং হ'ব
আৰু জংঘী কাৰণ মই অসমত দুজন মানুহ মোৰ খুব প্ৰিয় বিষ্ণু প্ৰসাদ আৰু মামণি ৰয়ছম গোস্বামী
এক্সেক্টলি
এই দুটা মানে দিৱস মই খুব ভাল পাওঁ আৰু মানে দুইজনক
মই সেইটো ৰাতিপুৱা সেইকাৰণে কৈছো যে বিদ্যায়তনিক ব্যাকৰণ আমি মানি চলিব নোৱাৰো ৰাভাৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত যদিও বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কথা বতৰা আছে গতিকে আমাৰ আবেগ এটা তাৰ লগত নিশ্চয় জড়িত হৈ আছে অনামিকা বাইদেউ আমি পাৰো নেকি টাইম হৈছে আমাৰ
আমি এতিয়া পাৰো হা আৰম্ভ কৰিবলৈ
মিউট কৰি থওঁ নহয় জানো
Okay, we are very good evening. We are going to start the second session of the first day of this national webinar. And today for this session, we have with us two renowned personalities, Mr. Moyur Bora and Mrs. Ratna Bharali Talukdar. And in this first, the lecture will be delivered by Mr. Moyur Bora, and I am taking the opportunity to introduce him in front of you all. We all know that Moyur Bora is a very popular motivational speaker and a social commentator who has already made his mark across the state of Assam. Moyur Bora is a critically acclaimed writer with 16 books to his credit, 14 in Assamese one in English and one translated book. He started his writing during his school days and now writes in both Assamese and English. For over the past 20 years, was associated with NABARD, and recently he has taken VRS from the post of Deputy General Manager, posted in Pune, Maharashtra. Moyur Bora mostly dabbles in non-fiction writing on a vast range of issues like westernization, casteism, and the NRC. When the national media was busy focusing on NRC, Moyur Bora wrote a counter-narrative giving the perspective of the indigenous people of Assam. The article was viral and it was shared by the people from across the globe. Moyur Bora is associated with some of the leading regional as well as national newspapers for whom he writes opinion pieces, and these include First Spot, Deccan Herald, Economic Times, Orissa Post, Assam Tribune, The Sentinel, and also Amarohom, etc. Moyur Bora is associated with some leading regional as well as national paper. I have already mentioned it, and he is a well-known face of Assamese television. He is a regular panelist in the talk show in both Assamese and English. Additionally, Moyur Bora has delivered motivational speeches in more than 70 colleges and almost all the universities in the Brahmaputra Valley for the benefit of the new generations. He has delivered several prestigious memorial lectures, mainly covering important slices of the history of Assam. For example, Ambika Giri Rai Chaudhary Memorial Lecture, Puspalata Das Memorial Lecture, Dr. Jogendra Narayan Bhuya Memorial Lecture, Dr. Dulal Chandra Mahanta Memorial Lecture, Dr. Madhav Chandra Bora Memorial Lecture, Padma Luchan Bhuya Memorial Lecture, etc. His books have also been selected as a part of syllabus and competitions at various educational institutions, a recognition he is very content with. For his works in the field of literature, Moyur Bora has been conferred with many prestigious awards, including the Sahitya Sabha Award, Karmabir Chandranath Sharma Award, Dr. Moidul Islam Bora Sahitya Award, etc. And among his most well-known received books are Ahomia Swabhimano Ruprekha and Abegor Kori Fali, etc. So we are very happy and we are very fortunate to have with us such a very brilliant personality among us right now. And I offer very warm welcome to Mr. Moyur Bora, and I request you to deliver your lecture on the topic, especially the topic which is Vishnu Prasad Rabha. No, it is not. This is, sorry, relevance of Vishnu Prasad Rabha's teaching in contemporary society. So, I request Moyur Bora to start his session. And
thank you, Dr. Anamika Gogoi Duora. It is indeed a great pleasure for me. It's rather a privilege for me to have been invited to speak on a national webinar organized by one of the premier educational institutions of the Northeastern region. That's the Arya Vidyapith College. Earlier also, I had the pleasure of interacting with some of the people online as well as offline in the last 3-4 years. I always consider it to be my profound, very deep privilege to have been welcomed by Arya Vidyapith College, and today is also not an exception. But before going to the restrictive formalities, I have seen my friend Ratna, who will be speaking after me. I have seen Stuti Goswami. I have also seen Pankaj Jyoti Gogoi and all the other people who have glued to their mobile phones or the laptops and who have joined in this webinar. They are all well-wishers of Assam, well-wishers of the educational scenario of Assam, and as well as definitely of the Arya Vidyapith College. Having said that, let me be slightly informal, because I heard when I joined, Pankaj Jyoti Gogoi was telling that since our emotions are attached with this man, Vishnu Prasad Rabha, so we have to violate with some good intention, probably the academic ethics or academic boundaries or academic straitjacket of this kind of webinar. So definitely, not being an academician and not being you will not find any academic overtones or scholastic underpinnings in my lecture, but definitely I will also like to violate that, and I hope all the people who are listening, they will at least give me the privilege of violating that academic privilege as beautifully enunciated by Dr. Pankaj Gogoi in his very thoughtful and insightful speech or lecture, or the brief comments that he made in the first session. I hope I'll be given that privilege. Now, taking that privilege, let me tell something about Dr. Anamika Gogoi Dora, who happens to be my friend. I think she's a friend, but she has been very unkind to me. I know the problem of addressing someone after lunch in offline mode when COVID was maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line. I am talking about a scenario of 2019 and before. Even at that point of time, when somebody has been invited to take a session immediately after lunch, people really used to be scared of that. But today, being an online session where challenges will be more, because we are not physically, we cannot look at the eyes of the twinkle at the eyes of the people. And at that time also, she has given me, and she has very unkindly given me, the post-lunch session. That's why I think Anamika Gogoi, since my topic is relevance of Vishnu Prasad Rabha in today's or contemporary society, I will take a leaf out of Vishnu Prasad Rabha's life and just try to take how to convert challenge into an opportunity. But at the same time, let me be very clear in telling you, I am not trying to compare myself with this great man. I am only trying to imbibe a learning from the great man's life. Vishnu Prasad Rabha, I heard both Loknath Goswami and Dr. Chandan Sharma intermittently. I could not hear what they have said during, but whatever I could gather, I'm sure it will be the people who were there in the first session or also in the both the session in the pre-lunch period. They will probably try to appreciate the fact that I will not be going in a very regimented way. I will take up as an informal student of history some of the incidents, some of the events of his life, and will try to relate those incidences to today's society. That will be my trust today, or modus operandi today in this session of 45 minutes to 1 hour. Vishnu Prasad Rabha was very unkindly disallowed to enter into a religious place of worship somewhere in Lower Assam during his heydays as a revolutionary, as a rebel. And he was told, the man who carried Shonkordev all throughout in his consciousness, I will come to it because today one of my senior friend, Mr. Loknath Goswami, has also told something about Shonkordev's influence on Jyoti Prasad and Vishnu Prasad Rabha. While I agree with most of the statements made by him, I think there are certain areas in which I would like to disagree, and I will tell why I disagree on those points. The man who was carrying Shonkordev all throughout his life, the year in which he took the membership of RCPI in 1945, the same year he wrote, Khuna 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 Hera Bhai, Mohan Kolakar Shonkor Amar, Hok Amar Arhi Biplabor. The year in which he joined RCPI, he wrote this poem. And this poem is not discussed, not analyzed as prolifically or as profoundly as I have seen in the Assamese popular discourse or literary discourse in the last few years or last 2 decades. Having said that, why I have taken that example of Vishnu Prasad Rabha trying to convert and challenge into an opportunity when he was not allowed to enter into that places of worship, he took it as a challenge and he tried to do something which no Assamese thought of, no Assamese dared to do it. He drew a beautiful portrait of Mahaprabhu Srimanta Shonkordev. The portrait of Srimanta Shonkordev, which is adorning most of the houses of Assamese people in the state as well as outside the state and abroad, this is mostly done by Vishnu Prasad Rabha. This is a perfect rejoinder to the people, to the people who believe that a person who was born as a tribal, he doesn't have the right to enter a places of worship, which has been supposed to be officially influenced by the saint reformer. Nothing can be, it is a travesty of justice, it is a travesty of the egalitarian ideals propounded by Srimanta Shankardev in this Assam. So I think this is an example through which we can relate Vishnu Prasad Rabha, how he tried to convert a challenge into an opportunity, and he was never very scathing in his criticism about that particular fact. We thought that this is a part of life, but definitely through his political ideology, struggle, and his works, he tried to change that thought process, which was quite prevalent, as Pankaj Jyoti Gogoi was highlighting while raising a question to Professor Mr. Loknath Goswami. He was highlighting that. I think he was quite aware of that, Vishnu Prasad Rabha, and therefore in his own way he tried to change that thought process, and he was successful to a great extent. Now, having said that, somebody asked, I think Dr. Sangita Kakoti asked of Arjya Vidyapit College to Mr. Sandan Sharma, that question I heard that about society being regressive, and Sandan Sharma telling that society was perhaps regressive at that point of time also. I agree with Professor Sharma, because try to remember that particular episode. Vishnu Rabha was a stone's throws away from the annual confluence or congregation of Ahom Sahitya Sabha somewhere in Lower Assam. Nobody cared to invite him, not as a speaker, not as a chief guest, not as a guest of honor. Even as a member, he was not invited, because all the people who are associated with organizing that particular Sahitya Sabha session in that part of the country or that part of Assam, they were busy because Mr. B.K. Nehru was coming. Perhaps it is B.K. Nehru or maybe some other governor, because B.K. Nehru was there in Assam, I think from 1968 to 73, and we all know Vishnu Rabha passed away in the year 1969 on 28th of June. So probably I am telling from my memory, it is B.K. Nehru or maybe some other governor. I think name is not very important. The name, the mindset of the Assamese people, the mindset of the people at that point of time was also trying to ingratiate themselves to the powers that be it the constitutional position of governor. I have got the highest form of respect, but at the same time, Vishnu Rabha, who was 500 or 600 meters away from the venue, trying to hide from the police atrocities, perhaps. That also I'm telling from memory, whether he was hiding at that point of time or whether he was there for some other work, that I don't remember fully. But this incident I remember very well, and I think it tells very poignantly, it tells very profoundly about the sense of apathy and indifference we had towards this great man when he was alive. I think many of you will be surprised to know Bombay, or for that matter now it is called Mumbai. Mumbai has got a wonderful Assamese diaspora. They are doing a great job now. But let me tell you what happened in 1968-69 when Vishnu Rabha, a sitting MLA, forget about all what he has done, because for many of the middle class people, MLA, MP, minister, they are the big man, they are the big people. This is the typical, I will not say Assamese, typical Indian mentality. You will not see in many of the Western countries. Despite being an MLA and despite being what he has done for the whole Assamese Jatiyo Jibon, Vishnu Rabha was almost ignored in Bombay when he went there to Tata Memorial Hospital for his treatment of cancer. And he was, I think it was very, very sorry state of affairs, and he lamented it very loudly, and he felt very, very bad. He felt dejected, distorted about this particular episode or this particular trait of character being shown by the Assamese diaspora of Mumbai at that point of time. I'm not blaming the present people, but some of them at that point of time, I think they cared less for this great man of Assam, who also happened to be an MLA. That means a sitting MLA undergoing treatment in Bombay, and the people there, they don't have the courtesy of calling him or doing something for him, and he was heartbroken about that. So these are why I'm telling, I'm not trying to blame someone. When you talk about relevance of his teachings, you have to understand the mentality of the people. You have to understand what, before French Revolution, it was told that middle class mind is an asset, but middle class mentality is a liability. That sort of liability was being shown by Assamese people at that point of time, and even today we are showing that. I know when yesterday one of my articles about the Devangana's parents were published, I have seen many people trying to advise their parents and many other things I came to know. I will not go into details about that. I'm just trying to amplify or underline that middle class mentality has remained more or less same, as has been beautifully elucidated or underlined by that great philosopher before the French Revolution. So Vishnu Rabha was also suffered hugely for this kind of mentality being exhibited by Assamese people, and the premier institutions of Assamese people like Ahom Sahitya Sabha, Ahom Prakashon Porishod. Many people ask that why we do not see the total works of Vishnu Prasad Rabha even today. There are many things have been written about that. Many people have spoken about that. Both the earlier speakers have also hinted about that. So I will not go into details about all those particular factors. Now, let me come back why I slightly disagree with Loknath Goswami as regards influence of Srimanta Shankardev on the life of Jyoti Prasad and Vishnu Prasad Rabha. He was very right. He said that both of them respected, but their association with the saint does not end only at showing some ceremonial or intellectual or cultural respect or reverence. It is much more beyond, and more so in Vishnu Rabha's life. But let me first give you my example in respect of Jyoti Prasad Agarwala. He was also mentioning beautifully about, I really enjoyed his lecture, Loknath Goswami's lecture, whatever little I heard. And he was telling about how he came back from Germany. And after coming back from Germany, he did not go to any temple. He went to Bordeaux, mainly to see the sculpture and other associated things in the Bordeaux, where Saint Shankardev was born in the year 1449. That's fine. That's fine. But why I am trying to digress and disagree and say that the impact of Shankardev was more profound that Mr. Goswami was willing to concede. Because the fact that if you read what Jyoti Prasad Agarwala wrote after that famous visit to Bordeaux, if you read that essay called Asomia Stapotyor Noborup, then you will understand. Because Jyoti Prasad, we all know, Jyoti Prasad has come from a family, originally they are from Rajasthan, but Jyoti Prasad's forefathers, his great-grandfather Nabarangalal Agarwal came, and then his son and Jyoti Prasad Agarwala's grandfather Haribilas Agarwala was the first man. He was the first man who published Nam Gokha and Kirtan Gokha in the printed form. Nobody, no Assamese in Bora, Khoikia, Hazarika, Horma thought about that. It is Mr. Haribilas Agarwala, Jyoti Prasad Agarwala's grandfather who thought about this and who did this. So why I am trying to highlight this, that impact of Shankardev was there in their family. You will find all of them were married to Assamese lady, mainly from Vaishnavite families and all. But that is not very important. That may be incidental. The important thing is what Jyoti Prasad wrote. Jyoti Prasad wrote that after I saw what I saw in Bordeaux, then I was thinking that I have already seen great sculpture in Germany and all. But after coming to Bordeaux and after observing what is there in front of me and which was done around 450 or 500 years back, we are taking pride in the fact that Abstenian style of architecture. But what Shankardev did 350 years before Germans, the same kind of Abstenian style of architecture. Some of the terminologies, some of the architectural or sculpture related terminologies I may slip. But what I am trying to say is Jyoti Prasad wrote afterwards that in that particular essay, যে মোৰ মনৰ sahabi bhuttu ebur dekhi virai lor marile. Because Jyoti Prasad was always respectful towards Shankardev, but he also thought probably Shankardev is perhaps not as great as his forefathers or his father or grandfather taught. But after coming from Germany, when he saw that Abstenian style of architecture being beautifully exemplified in the Bordoa sculpture or the Bordoa Namghar or Prarthana Griho, at that point of time he said that all my pomp and glory and vanity and arrogance probably have disappeared into thin air. Mur monor sahab tu bhirai lor marile. So that's why I mean to say, citing some historical example, which will be very relevant to understand this great man in contemporary society. I think Jyoti Prasad's influence or Shankardev's influence on Jyoti Prasad was very, very profound. Come back to, if you come to Vishnu Prasad Rabha, I think that impact is even more profound. It is deeper. It is much deeper than what we see in Jyoti Prasad's life. I already told in 1945 when he joined that RCPI movement, the same year he wrote that famous poem. And we also know about his thoughts about Shankardev, which have again come which have been exemplified in some beautiful numbers rendered by various artists of different generation. Mr. Goswami himself gave an example. He sang also for some time, "O Gurumur Shankar." That's fine. That may be some amount of hero worship may be there. If you remember Carlyle and all, maybe some, because this is a song which has been written trying to glorify, trying to see the saint in a better light, or in the light as perceived by Vishnu Prasad Rabha at that point of time. I will not say better light because that will not be the proper word. But having said that, I would also like to say the clarion call of Vishnu Prasad Rabha, that O Homia Dekadol, if you listen to this particular song, all of you will try to understand they are talking about a Dekagiri. And Dekagiri is no other than Mahapurush Srimanta Shankardev, and he was also trying to highlight Ohim Bahur Ball. And in another stanza, afterwards, he tells, Kirtan Dokhom Nam Gokha, Hok Amar Purjo, Nat Git Nam Bor Git, Hok Ronor Turjo. I think what more greater sense of impact or influence of the saint you will find in this man, Vishnu Prasad Rabha. But also I would like to say, in many of the creations you will find, he was talking about Shankardev, and he was carrying that slice of Shankardev in his heart and consciousness all throughout. After Lakshminath Barua, before that academic discourse of Banikanto Kakoti, Maheshwar Nayak, and other scholars, Satyendranath Sharma started, before that, in popular imagination, the two men were responsible for popularizing the saint and his works, and they are mainly Lakshminath Barua and Vishnu Prasad Rabha. But Vishnu Prasad Rabha always remains underappreciated. He is insufficiently recognized for many works that he have done. Many people have already spoken about that we can see in terms of the mainstream, so-called mainstream Assamese society's attitude or mentality towards Vishnu Prasad Rabha, his works and different points of his life. I was just trying to give an example of the Mumbai diaspora. You say Ahom Sahitya Sabha, Ahom Prakashon Porikhod. But I will also say one more thing. The fact that the rulers and the ruling parties are not comfortable with Vishnu Prasad Rabha is a robust testimony to the fact that he always thought about the marginalized and the disadvantaged section of the population. See, we all know rulers in different years, different decades, they always try to invoke the marginalized only for getting votes. Mostly, I will not say only, but mostly for getting votes. But for Vishnu Prasad Rabha, the common people is central to his thought process, to his tenets of his philosophy. Whatever he wants to do for this Assamese society at large, with a tremendous sense of egalitarianism, with a tremendous sense of justice and fair play, common people remain the central theme to his thought process and to his philosophy. And it remained same all throughout his life. You will find a lot of eccentricities. He had his foibles and idiosyncrasies. I will not say eccentricity, but he had his idiosyncrasies. And let me tell you, having seen, or I'm a very insignificant person, just trying to understand Shankardev in flesh and blood, and also Vishnu Rabha in flesh and blood. I don't agree with Vishnu Rabha at all when he was trying to eulogize Shankardev by comparing him with a historical figure, but as well as with a figure which has been believed by many to be an incarnation of God or God. We all know, I am just trying to highlight your fact or invite your attention to the fact that Vishnu Prasad Rabha very famously said, there are three Mahapurus, great souls or great noble souls in this world. One is Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the second one is Leonardo da Vinci, and third one is Srimanta Shankardev. Now just try to imagine why I say that I don't accept this, because this is an invidious comparison. This is an invidious statement. You cannot compare two historical figures to one person or figure or God whose historicity has not been proved beyond reasonable doubt. Sri Krishna, I may worship Sri Krishna. Krishna Sanskriti, all about Jyoti Prasad talked about, to some extent Vishnu Rabha also talked about. But having said that, Sri Krishna's historicity is not beyond doubt. It may be there in many people's heart. That's a different issue. But you cannot compare two historical figure with another person who may be a God, an incarnation of God, and many of for the atheist and agnostic, he will nothing but a figment of someone's imagination. So I think there he went wrong, and I don't have any compunction. I don't have any problem in saying that there he went absolutely wrong about that. But in all other works, he will find a profound sense of reverence towards Shankardev. So I'll leave Shankardev here. Let me come to some other points. See, I told you that ruling party's discomfort or discomfiture with Vishnu Prasad Rabha is nothing but a robust testimony or tribute to this great man. See, all throughout, he was not involved. He joined RCPI when he read the communist literature. Later on, 10 years, 11 years back, when he joined the CPI, leaving RCPI, he contested elections also. He contested elections twice from Kokrajhar for the Lok Sabha, and he failed spectacularly both the times. Although we know that as an independent candidate, he became a member of Assam Legislative Assembly from Tezpur in the year 1967. But when he tried to fight election to become an MP, he failed both the times. But having said that, you have to remember that people and the mass people, and when I talk about mass people, the marginalized, the disadvantaged, the bottom of the pyramid people were always very, very central, dear to his heart. And that is the reason why Vishnu Prasad Rabha's legacy lives. Why Vishnu Prasad Rabha's legacy lives, not only lives, it lives very, very robustly, and it lives very, very profoundly. Because in the popular imagination, so a revolutionary, he is also a Hoinik Hilpi. That's why I like to use the epithet in Ohomia, Hoinik Hilpi Vishnu Prasad Rabha. Now let me again come to when we are talking about contemporary society. Many of you will be young scholars and all. For them and as well as for the people of our age also, I would like to invite your attention to one particular incident in the last 40 years that I have seen. Assam agitation from 1979 to 85. Three things happened in Assam. Whether it has been able to achieve the objectives and all, this is beyond the purview of today's webinar. I am not going into that. But nobody can deny that it's a landmark event in the history of Assam. If it is a landmark event, it has also brought in unknowingly three changes. Before Assam agitation, 40 years before 1979, Bihu, Bohag Bihu, was not celebrated with a similar kind of fervor and gusto and enthusiasm in all throughout the country. Sorry, all throughout the state. You will find it mainly in Upper Assam, especially Husori and all. After Assam agitation, you try to see the rise of Assamese, some sort of subnationalism or Assamese feeling of solidarity. This is basically a middle class driven agitation. So a lot of templates and tropes were used, and Bihu became some sort of Brahmaputra Valley thing, and Lower Assam also, they also caught the fancy of the Bihu. Secondly, and more importantly, Jyoti Prasad and Vishnu Prasad Rabha, as many of the scholars have earlier highlighted, during their lifetime, they never got the due recognition from the Assamese society, or rather I will say Assamese society, which has been dominated by the Assamese middle class intellectuals. But Assam agitation have brought them into the mainstream of popular imagination. That we should not forget. That's why I'm not talking only because of the fact that 1985, when Prafulla Mohanto comes to power, and in all the state government offices, you see two photos, one of Vishnu Prasad Rabha, the other one of Jyoti Prasad Agarwala. This is a attendant, incidental result of the strategy being adopted. I will not say it is a strategy in a very adroit or astute sense. It was a strategy to energize yourself. It was a strategy to inspire the Assamese people. Yes, there are some common enemies. There is a problem, the problem of infiltration, which is threatening the very existence of the Assamese people in their own homeland. So for that, if you want to be energized, and Lokinath Besborua utilized Lasit Borfukan, Shonkordev Silarai to energize those people in the beginning of the 20th century. After 8 decades of the 20th century, during Assam agitation time, Vishnu Prasad Rabha and Jyoti Prasad Agarwala, along with Bohag Bihu, came to the mainstream. Bohag Bihu was in the mainstream, but I mean to say in Lower Assam also, it became very popular, especially the Husori Gua and all other tradition, the beautiful tradition of Bihu. So those things, we have to remember that. Now, let me highlight, let me invite your attention to one more particular aspect. Vishnu Rabha was born in Dhaka, and many youngsters earlier, whenever I went for some lecture in college and all, they fail to understand why he was born in Dhaka. Then in a historical context, I had to tell that he was born in the capital of Assam, and Assam, the nomenclature was not there as prominently as during that period of 1905 to 1911. When Lord Curzon partitioned Bengal, that partition of Bengal took place, Assam, which became a chief commissioner's province in 1874, along with Sylhet district, now in Bangladesh, that time with East Bengal, in 1905, whole West Bengal became one entity, and East Bengal, the province of East Bengal and Assam, with capital in Dhaka, not in Shillong, became the capital of the state of Assam. And why I said Assam had to play second fiddle, because the name of Assam also got backseated. It had to take the backseat. The province of Eastern Bengal and Assam became the name for that 6 years. And during the years, in the year 1909, Vishnu Prasad Rabha was born in Dhaka. Then you just try to see, he studied for some time in during school days in Tezpur. Otherwise, all his college life, he studied where? He studied in St. Paul's College in Calcutta. He studied in Ripon College. He became, I think, associated, he became a member of their, I think, general secretary of the student body. Thereafter, he comes back to Coach Bihar. He became, enrolled himself in Victoria College. Then he goes to East Bengal. He becomes a student of Michael College, perhaps. I'm telling from my memory, since I tell from extempore. So all these 4 colleges, from which he ultimately ended his studies in the year 1931, if you will see that he has studied mostly in Bengal, and he was born in Dhaka. Although everything got shifted after 1911, they had to come back. Shillong became again capital. Then East Bengal, that partition of Bengal was annulled, and Assam again became a chief commissioner's province. That's fine. But when he was born, and if you see his college studies, he did in Bengal mostly. Bengal, Coach Bihar, and East Bengal also. That was undivided Bengal, to be precise. But did he embrace much of the Bengali culture? No. It was again, you will see, I don't have time to go into so much of detail to study only about Shonkordev and his influence, but it is mainly, primarily because of Srimanta Shonkordev that he embraced after coming back, and also during his time in Calcutta, because this is the time when he was a strapping youth and he was trying to change the society. Even before joining the RCPI movement, many of the egalitarian tenets and philosophy and principles that Vishnu Prasad Rabha, we always tell that he cherished and celebrated all throughout his life. He imbibed those during his student days. And that's why his link with Assamese culture, Asamiya Janajibon, is very, very strong, very, very robust. At no point of time, you cannot say it was tenuous. I will give you the example of that. See, he was a tribal. He was a Boro. He was a Kosari. He was born, but because his father had the surname of Das and Thakuria also because of the adopted familial things. I will not go into details about the historicity of all those aspects. The important thing was he was born in a Boro family, although his surname was Rabha. And he felt and he told number of times that they are the primary inhabitants of Assam. They also say that they are the arbiters, in different words, I am trying to paraphrase, the arbiters of our destiny. He was very, very conscious about the aspirations, about the logical aspirations, about the rational hopes, about the rational problems, all the small tribal people, tribal groups were facing. He was aware of that. And despite being aware of that, despite being a person who gives highest amount of or shown highest amount of sensitivity and empathy towards the emerging feelings of aspiration among different tribal groups, including Boros, he was one man who always highlighted and underlined about the inclusive Assamese template or inclusive Assamese identity. I think that is very, very important. And when we talk about relevance of Vishnu Prasad Rabha, we have spectacularly failed to imbibe his learning, and that is why we have got problems galore in today's world, especially after 1985 and all, when AGP came to power, and they forgot to give the adequate respect or the due respect to the Boro people, the people who waged their agitation demanding for a separate state. But our people who converted Ahom Ganapariষদ into Ahomia Ganapariষদ in a very, very narrow sense, they failed to learn Vishnu Prasad Rabha's teachings. And that is why problem of different orders started. And even now, that problem is not finally over. That some amount of bitterness and acrimony is still there. Why you will find during the heydays of the Boro agitation that Assamese are not welcome here, except two Assamese, that is Dr. Bhupen Hazarika and Parag Kumar Das. Why this kind of posters were seen in many places of the present Boroland area 20 years back? It is because of the fact we should not say that some people instigated them against the Assamese. Maybe some people might have done, but we should also try to admit our mistake in appreciating their genuine aspirations, which our AGP government spectacularly failed to read it, to take it to a logical conclusion, after which the Bodofa, Upendranath Brahmo, he said that from now onwards, we'll not discuss anything with state government, we'll discuss only with the government of India. See, these are contemporary history. These are slices of contemporary history in which failure of the Assamese people to imbibe those learning from Vishnu Prasad Rabha has been exposed, has been manifested. So I will not say beautifully, has manifested in a very ugly fashion. It shows our warts and moles in a very, very unkind way. And this is truly unkind. This is truly, and I think we deserve that. We deserve that the people who thought we are the arbiters of the public discourse in Assam, and we only will set the tone for the discourse, how it will proceed. And we fail miserably to imbibe those learning from Vishnu Prasad Rabha. For me, it is the most unfortunate thing. Having failed to give him due respect during his lifetime, having failed to congregate immediately after his death, to commemorate his death, to commemorate his work, to celebrate his work, was also a failure. It also pains my heart, but it pains my heart doubly when I see that we fail to learn the lesson from his life and repeated the same sort of mistake in our life during our time. That is our biggest failure. Many people only talk about Sahitya Sabha etu nokorile, Prakashon Porishode etu nokorile, তেওঁৰ মৃত্যুবাৰ্ষিকী, জ্যোতি প্ৰসাদৰ মৃত্যুবাৰ্ষিকী 9 জন মানুহ হৈছিল, বিষ্ণু প্ৰসাদ ৰাভাৰ মৃত্যুত কোনো মানুহ সেই সময়ত বেছিকে হিলডোল ভাঙি নাহিল। হয়, these are facts we are not proud of, we are ashamed of, but our failure to learn from their teaching, as I have exemplified in case of Vishnu Prasad Rabha during Assam agitation and Bodo agitation time, I think this is more shameful. This is more shameful if you believe in asking question to yourself. নিজক প্ৰশ্ন সোধাৰ মানসিকতা যি মানুহৰ আছে, মই ভাবো সেই মানুহে এই কথাটো নিখংকুচে নিৰ্দ্বিধাই স্বীকাৰ কৰিবৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত তেওঁ কেতিয়াও কোনো ধৰণৰ প্ৰতিৰোধকৰ সন্মুখীন নহব। I believe firmly in that. I think there we failed Vishnu Rabha, the man who celebrated a Assamese inclusive identity. He never said he was not a sub-national. He was not a Boro or tribal sub-nationalist who thought only about that particular tribal group. He always worked for comprehensive, holistic, inclusive, and egalitarian. These two words are important. He never saw Assamese from the prism of some of the leaders of Assam agitation. Very, very constricted, very, very compressed, not that sort of view. His view was wide, his view was inclusive, his view was egalitarian. And that therefore, whenever we digress from his view, whenever we digress from his worldview, we falter, and we faltered very, very badly. So there, I think, relevance of Vishnu Prasad Rabha is still very sharp and still very profound. Even now also, we have the tendency of committing the same kind of mistake. Let me give you even far contemporary example. I wrote somewhere, I got it somewhere, I don't know whether I wrote it down or not, that that's my problem. That's the beauty of an academician. They will be writing everything and so beautifully they can enunciate it. The problem with when I try to speak from the extempore, many of the things will betray me at the last moment. I was just trying to highlight, I'm yet to get, okay, fine. Now I finally found it. He was in one of the dramas he wrote, one of the creative work penned by Vishnu Prasad Rabha. There he wrote about the importance of amity, harmony, and coordination between Hindus and Muslims. He wrote, Hindu cannot be enemies of Muslims, and Muslim cannot be enemies of Hindus. Who are enemies of both Hindus and Muslims? His point, his opinion, his view is crystal clear. He said people who try to fish in troubled waters, people who communalize everything, they are enemies of both Hindus and Muslims. That, I think, unfortunately, I don't know, many people may not have the gumption to say that, but I will definitely like to stick my neck out and say, in the last few years, we have seen the shrinkage of the liberal space, as well as many people try to communalize this binary between Hindus and Muslims and try to politically capitalize on that binary for getting some more votes in the election. This is a fact we have seen. Nobody can deny that. But Vishnu Rabha's life and works, if you see, how with so much of rock-like determination, he fought against that. And he not only wrote in other Obhibakhan or his address, he wrote it also in his creative works. He put it in the lips of some actor or actress who were part of that drama. So this is simply wonderful. He could foresee things, what India or Assam is going to come through after 50 years, maybe after 60 years. But have we been able to take notice of that? That's why I said very, very consciously, the fact that ruling classes of all the ages, I'm not telling the present ruling classes, for last 50, 60 years, he was arrested when Vishnu Medhi, he was otherwise a great man. That, although I don't like for some of his comments like he made about Fijo, very, very unflattering, uncharitable remark he made about Fijo. And thereafter we know how the Nagaland movement went and how Vishnu Ram Medhi's, that particular statement was instrumental. But leave aside Vishnu Ram Medhi, what I am trying to say, when Vishnu Rabha was first arrested, that Vishnu Ram Medhi was the Chief Minister of Assam. I am just trying to highlight that shrinkage of liberal space and the ruling classes not being comfortable with Rabha's ideals, it is not a thing to be seen in the present context. In the last 50, 60 years of time, you will see all the ruling classes of all political parties, they only provide lip service to Vishnu Prasad Rabha. They do not have that earnest desire to imbibe his teachings. That's why many people want to make him only Kola Guru. That he's a wonderful artist and his songs and his dramas, this and that, and they want to celebrate only that aspect of Vishnu Prasad Rabha. But partial celebration of Vishnu Prasad Rabha's works, his life, his creativity will be suicidal. It will be truly one-sided, I feel if you want to respect this great man, you have to cherish his ideals. If required, you criticize him, but try to cherish his ideals holistically. Don't try to cleverly or adroitly leave aside an important slice of his thought process. Then your learning, whatever you try to imbibe from his life, will be inadequate, will be flawed, and it will create a different kind of problem for the society. This is my understanding of Vishnu Prasad Rabha. If you want to understand him fully. May not agree with him in all the points, as I said about his comments about Sri Krishna, Leonardo da Vinci, and Shankardeva. You can disagree with him, but do not be clever, do not be astute or cunning while trying to understand this man. That's what many people are doing, and that's what pains me, that's what angers me, and that's why I am telling, and I'm repeating for the third or fourth time, that the fact that the present ruling class and the present way the politics is conducted, the fact that they are not very comfortable with Vishnu Prasad Rabha is a wonderful tribute to his thought process, to his ideas, to his tenets, to his principles, to his ideals and principles. I firmly believe in that. So this is Vishnu Prasad Rabha about this thing. I don't know how much time I have got, because I know our friend Ratna is also waiting, then there may be some questions also. And now as I try to look at my page, let me see if I have covered everything in the process. People say it is very auspicious also, although I doubt whether Vishnu Prasad Rabha himself would have believed in this kind of omen, because I don't know the place in which I stay in this part of Guwahati. Now it has started raining heavily. So in between also there may be some disruption. I don't know whether you have been able to hear me clearly or not. But my point is very, very simple. If you want to understand this man, if you want to imbibe any learning from his works, from his life, then you have to read him. Then you have to analyze him in totality. You may not agree with him in all the sphere, but wherever you agree and disagree, if you come to a solution or conclusion about the areas or points in which you feel that you need to learn from him, then definitely this will be beginning of a great intellectual journey for any scholar, any academician, or anyone who loves Assam. Anyone loving Assam cannot hide away from the fact that Vishnu Prasad Rabha, Jyoti Prasad Agarwala, these are the important slice of Assam. You cannot love Assam without loving some of the aspects of Vishnu Prasad Rabha and Jyoti Prasad Agarwala. So those things are also very, very important. Having said that, I would like to highlight the last point before, if I have to go any questions that I don't know, that inclusive and egalitarian Assamese identity, which Vishnu Rabha, despite being born in a tribal family, and it is good that he was born in a tribal family, he knew the things from their side. He tried to synthesize. He tried to bring about a syncretic and organic relationship between various tribal groups whose mother tongue was not Assamese but their own beautiful languages and dialects, and the Assamese people or Assamese speaker like me and you and some of the people who are today in this seminar. I think for them, if we can make this identity of Assamese, if we can broaden the concept, if you can widen the definition of this Assamese, then some of the negative connotations that the word Assamese have imbibed or word Assamese have gathered in the last 40 years after Assam agitation, that can be purged. I'm using a word which has been very frequently used in communist terminology, purging. So that needs to be purged. If we can purge this, then I think Vishnu Prasad Rabha will effortlessly walk in to our intellectual world, and we'll all be enriched and emboldened by his thought process. And definitely with his thought process, his worldview, his principles and philosophy, we would at least be able to beautify our today's contemporary society by whatever learnings that he has left as a wonderful legacy of that particular time. Thank you, Arjya Vidyapith College. Thank you, Dr. Anamika. Thank you, other scholars and academics who are glued. And if there is any other question, then I will try to answer. Otherwise, it was a proud privilege for me. And as I speak extempore and once or twice places looking for some paper and all, I fumble. I always fumble when I look for paper. That's why I believe in extempore more. So I'm very sorry if I have some sort of desonated you or like brought in little bit of dissonance in your thought process. I'm sorry for that. Otherwise, once again, I would like to thank Vidyapit College, the great fraternity, for having given me this opportunity to talk about this great man and his work on his death anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayur Bora. There are some questions, I think, in the chat box, and very beautiful comments for you also. Mr. Ayub has written that a very relevant and informative lecture delivered by Honorable Guest Mayur sir. Thank you, sir. Very excellent. And Dr. Archana Devi also said that Apunar Bhaktavya Oti Prasangik. And Dr. Sangita Kakoti of the History Department of our college is she has given one question for you. Just trying to get my facts that number one, Rabha was actually born in a Boro lineage. His father had been adopted by a family friend whose surname was Rabha, and it was Rabha who had actually initiated the making of Joymoti, the first Assamese film in 1930, but had to stop because of financial problems. He later invited Jyoti Prasad to make the film. Is not this true?
Thank you, Sangita. I think Sangita Kakoti is known for some very, very probing questions. In the first half also, I have seen. I think that's the beauty of the Department of History. I am an informal student, but she is a professor. But to be very honest with her and to be very honest with the fraternity who are here today, I don't know about this. But only thing I know that Vishnu Prasad Rabha, after Jyoti Prasad decided to make Joymoti, he was also associated with the movie. I think he was scoring the music or certain amount of cultural side. Vishnu Prasad Rabha also oversaw. So that was the only piece of information I right now have. But whether he could not do it for financial problems and later on requested Jyoti Prasad to make it, that I have to check, and I request Dr. Sangita Kakoti also to check up. And if he gets any concrete information, she can share with me directly. I'll be very happy, or she can give it to my friend Anamika or Dr. Pankaj. But it was really a wonderful question. And questions when you are not able to answer very, very conclusively and convincingly, that shows the beauty of our journey or quest for more and more knowledge. I think that Sangita Kakoti has exemplified before us, and I am thankful to her for that.
Thank you.
Sir, small observation.
Yes.
I express my gratitude for your excellent presentation. Perhaps our participant can realize the enigma of Mayur Bora, what makes Mayur Bora a prolific writer and a popular motivating speaker. Sir, regarding the question of Sankardeva and others, you raised the question the way Rabha and others eulogized those great figures. Of course, the way they historicized those figures, Sri Krishna or Sankardeva, it's of course a misnomer. But another important dimension that I want to share with you, I do not know how to put it. Yes, we need to look at the contradictions of Vishnu Rabha's life. On the one hand, we know that he was a very committed communist leader, and for that matter, he believed in scientific socialism. Right? And on the other hand, if you look at some of his composition, like Porojanamot Shubha Laganot Jodihe Amar Hoy Dekha, it is of course a love song, but if you look at the narratives, it reflects a kind the otherworldliness, the mythical narratives of Hindu religion, right? On the one hand, he believed in scientific socialism. On the other hand, we have seen a kind of mythical narratives that is there in our society, the Hindu society. So that is a kind of contradiction. And Ashish Shandy has pointed out those things, why mythical narratives are important when we are talking about mass politics or mass political mobilization, or for that matter, cultural mobilization. The way Gandhi used the concept of Ram Rajya, although he was not at all a Hindu nationalist, but he used the face of Ram, the concept of Ram Rajya. His Ram Rajya is of course different from the Hindu nationalist imagination of Ram Rajya. So that is, Rabha is a person who played a very significant role in making a different kind of Assamese public sphere. That public sphere is of course different from the theoretical imagination put forwarded by Habermas in the 18th century, the post French Revolution kind of bourgeois society's public sphere, where all the people are literate people, middle class people, the way they interact, the way they discuss the public issues in the public domain, the issue of public sphere that has been theorized by Habermas. But I believe that Rabha also created a different kind of public sphere, which is of course we cannot juxtapose with those theoretical formulation of Habermas concept of this public sphere. Rabha created a different kind of public sphere. Of course, we can remember in that context, you have already referred to the concept of Namghar. It's a different kind of public space, particularly in this part of the world. So that mythical narratives to mobilize the illiterate people, although I do not know whether he personally believed in those kind of mythical narratives or not, but still for political mobilization, for cultural mobilization, the way he involved in the mass politics. Jyoti Prasad also talked about Sri Krishna, the imagination of Krishna Sangskriti Mure, Jibonore Kokha Krishna, Bojao Kikhure Benu, the devotee of love and beauty. So that kind of mythical narratives, because we are living in a society which is full of mythical narratives. Whether all people are not university educated, highly literate middle class people. He was dealing with the peasant society. He was dealing with the illiterate people. He was dealing with a totally different kind of public sphere. And Rabha, of course, played a very significant role towards making a different kind of public sphere in the post-colonial Assam. I do not know whether I am in a position to communicate or not, but I am basically talking about the significance of mythical narratives, the contradictions that we have seen in Vishnu Rabha's life. So that is one observation. And another important observation that you talked about, that Rabha born and brought up in, most of the time he was there in Bengal. He was born in Dhaka. But that is the tragedy of partition that our great Prometheus Borua. Prometheus Borua is an Assamese, of course, but Bengali society will ever remember Prometheus Borua because of his contribution in Bengali as well as in Hindi cinema. So that common cultural zone of Eastern India, whether it is the Bengali or the Assamese, we had a kind of common cultural ground that has been destroyed by the politics of partition and independence. So that's all that I want to share with you.
Only one observation. I totally agree with your second observation. And the first observation also, since you are talking about mythical narratives and all, beautifully encapsulated many of the paradoxes, many of the contradictions that we see in social science or humanities. But having said that, let me tell you one more thing. I believe in this. I don't know, I may be wrong, but I still believe in that a man is always defined by his contradiction. And if you want to understand his man, you have to, or women, a person, you have to understand the contradiction in his or her life, as well as the contradiction in his times. Let me give you one quick example. When Mahatma Gandhi wrote very unflatteringly in 1909 about Assam in his book in Gujarati, Hind Swaraj, and later on translated into English by himself in one of his, I think, ship journey from UK to South Africa. When there are many educated people, thousands of educated people in Assam, and he came to Assam for the first time in 1921. Before that, nobody thought about protesting about Gandhiji because of the aura, because of the social sphere, or whatever terminology you use. But there is only one Assamese, Gyanadabhiram Borua, who protested against that. And Gandhi, after coming over, that's the greatness of Gandhi. He realized his mistake, and whatever he made comment about Assamese people being like thieves and dacoits or like pindaris, he said he gave his unconditional apology to the people of Assam. Now, same Gyanadabhiram Borua, see the contradiction in his life. When there was a demand for Cotton College, where we studied together with Dr. Anamika, and many of you perhaps, Ratna also, studied in Cotton College, we are from the same batch. Then same Cotton College, many people fought, especially Manik Chandra Borua, but Gyanadabhiram Borua wrote that instead of spending money for establishing a college in Assam, let us try to build a hostel for the boys in Calcutta. So this is I am not saying he never wished well for Assam. It was his thought process, the man who protested against Gandhi's fulminations, against these are illogical fulminations, rather I will say, about Assam. The same man also said that why there should be a college in Assam. Similar kind of thing, he criticized Gunabhiram Borua also, his own father, because he said he was a Brahmo, and Brahmo means he doesn't believe in the caste systems and many of the paraphernalia which you are highlighting while posing a question to Mr. Loknath Goswami. But he criticized Devendranath Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore's father, as well as his own father. He criticized his own father. If you read his autobiography, Moor Kotha, you will find that Gunabhiram Borua's refusal to make Anandaram Borua his son-in-law, because Sarnalata, you all know, he himself, son has written that Sarnalata was not allowed to be married to Anandaram Borua because of the fact that Anandaram Borua was not born in a Brahmin family. So he criticized him. At the same time, he criticized Devendranath Tagore also for not allowing Rabindranath Tagore to marry Sarnalata. So all those things you will find, and there are many people like Bolinarayan Bora's life is an example, Gandhi's life is an example. Even you pick up any great man, you will find contradictions, and contradictions will sharpen your understanding about the man, his susceptibilities, his vulnerabilities, his weaknesses, but most importantly, his strengths and contributions to the society. I think we have to understand Shankardev, we have to understand Jyoti Prasad, we have to understand Vishnu Rabha as a flesh and blood man, and whatever social sphere or aura they might be having, we have to, while trying to analyze, we have to dissect them from that particular aura and social sphere, and we have to analyze them in the context of their time and be critical, keeping in mind the fact that they lived in 500 years ago or 100 years ago or 80 years ago. That's what my 2 cents about this particular important point highlighted by Dr. Pankaj Jyoti Gogoi. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moyur Bora, my friend, and you are and Ratna. We belong to the same base in Cotton College, and I am really very happy and feeling proud right now that you both are with us at present. And now I request the assistant professor and of the Department of English and also the coordinator of this webinar, Mrs. Devasri Bhattacharjee, to offer the formal vote of thanks to Moyur Bora.
Thank you, Beto. Good evening, everyone. Sir, it was a privilege listening to you. Thank you for your insightful speech and also an equally engaging interactive session. You have introduced us to some new perspectives with which to understand and appreciate Vishnu Prasad Rabha, for drawing our attention to his events in his life that actually reflect his spirit to transform, I'm quoting you, sir, to transform challenges into opportunities. You have also highlighted his contribution in the life of the common people and the marginalized, and also his vision for an inclusive Assamese identity. So indeed, his ideology for a vibrant and liberal society is worthy of emulation for our present society as well. So thank you, sir, for enlightening our minds with new ideas.
Thank you, Debosri. And once again, I thank Mr. Moyur Bora for his very illuminating and informative and thought-provoking lecture. And now we are going to start the second lecture of this session, which will be delivered by the very popular journalist Ratna Bharali Talukdar on the topic Impact of Peasant Movement on Transformation of Vishnu Prasad Rabha as a Revolutionary Singer. Now, I would like to take opportunity to introduce her in front of you all. Ratna Bharali Talukdar is an independent journalist and a creative writer. She is a recipient of Ram Nath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism in 2005, Chameli Devi Jain Outstanding Woman Media Person Award in 2004 and 5, and Ladli Media National Award in Journalism in 2009. She is also a recipient of Munin Borkotoki Award in 2009 and Eka Ebong Koekjon Sahitya Sanskriti Sanman in 2015 for literature. She has completed 9 media fellowships by undertaking rigorous trips to different and difficult areas of Northeastern region. She has 3 collections of short stories and a novel to her credit. So we are really very happy with us that she is right now with us, and I now request of Mrs. Ratna Bharali Talukdar to start her session. Thank you. Oh,
thank you,
Ratna Bharali.
Thank you, Dr. Anamika Ndora. First, I'd like to thank Ajavita College and the organizers for inviting me to deliver a speech on this topic. I'm not a very good orator. In fact, I am not an orator. I am a journalist and creative writer. I love to write. Still, since you have said to say something, and I have prepared a note. I'm going to read it out. I actually prefer introduction on this topic because this topic is very talked about very late. People often, people while highlighted different aspects of Vishnu Rabha often ignore this particular aspect. So I'd like to talk about this. And my paper, it is titled "The Impact of Present Movement on Transformation of Vishnu Rabha as a Revolutionary Singer." So I'm going to start. It is not very easy to understand life and ideology of Vishnu Prasad Rabha, who mastered in such diversified creative fields of art, culture, and literature, a creative genius of 20th century Assam, and one of the most celebrated cultural figures. This revolutionary leader simultaneously excelled his creativity in wide-ranging areas. He scripted novels, short stories, thought-provoking prose, poems, and songs, and composed music. He was also an actor and a dancer who mesmerized personalities like Uday Shankar. He had deep knowledge of Indian classical music. As a true anthropologist, he traveled length and breadth of hills and plains of northeastern region to know living elements of culture and social dynamics of various ethnic societies and communities living remotely in these parts. He had very clear, accurate, and scientific observation and introspection in understanding life and issues of these ethnic societies and their cultural diversities. Very few of us, however, remember his contribution as an important social anthropologist who extensively visits in the areas of our region. Of course, he did not visit these places purely with an academic purpose, but his observation and methodology of study was highly academic. Our textbooks and reference books of academic studies hardly have any mention of Vishnu Prasad Rabha's field-based work carried out at his own efforts, visiting different tribes and communities of northeastern region. This fieldwork he undertook, however, purely to meet his trust of knowing the unknown, and he did not take them as a profession. His deep knowledge on written documents, histories, oral traditions of various human groups, their place of origin, migratory routes, various kingdoms set up by small communities, the ups and downs of these dynasties, encompassed geographical borders, and covered various human groups inhabiting in entire eastern Himalayan range. All these have deep impact on him in understanding cultural and linguistic diversities and social dynamics of the region. He has also knowledge on evolution of human race and the evolution process of physical features of human being in different stages of civilization. Here too, his methodology of study was academic. He studied the linkages of primitive human with apes and monkeys, the stone tool-age cultures of primitive period, evolution of man as a social animal, the dynamics and also different patriarchal and matriarchal societies of the world. This helped him to understand cultural elements and dynamics of matrilineal societies living in northeastern region, although he was not a professional anthropologist. However, he could not carry out continuous and extensive academic work on this particular field because of his vagabond nature, creative restlessness, political activism, but his accurate anthropological knowledge in terms of cultural and linguistic diversities of Northeast India and its neighbors, particularly Nepal and Bhutan, is reflected on his encyclopedic writings like Manav Jati, writings in articles like Manav Jati or Human Race, Assamia Christi, and Bane Kebang, etc., where he has written detailed anthropological accounts of ethnic societies living in erstwhile northeast frontier area and present Arunachal Pradesh. His clear and precise understanding of ethnic ways of life of various groups and subgroups living all throughout the region is visible in most of his writings with frequent and cautious mentions. Like his anthropological studies of tribes and communities, Vishnu Prasad Rabha also sincerely studied origin and evolution of Assamese culture and literature and the social dynamics of Assamese society. His assessment of Shankardeva and his work was highly scientific. Vishnu Prasad Rabha was a brilliant student. He passed examinations with flying colors. He was born to an affluent family. His father was a Rai Bahadur. The family was financially sound. In fact, Vishnu Prasad Rabha was offered luxurious jobs in the Department of Police by the British government. But this person with extraordinary versatility was born to choose different paths of struggle and creativity. Since his student life, he was active in politics and took active participation in India's freedom movement. He was the General Secretary of Ripon College, Calcutta. His political activism led him to abandon his formal education. Although he took active participation in nationalist movement of India's freedom struggle initially, he realized that only political independence could not fulfill the dream of thousands of people living in extreme poverty all over the country without economic freedom. Condition of poor people would remain the same without economic freedom in truest sense. He believed that freedom could be obtained only in a classless society. Such realization gradually drawn him to Marxist ideology, and he became a member of RCPI, that is Revolutionary Communist Party of India. His active participation in farmer struggle to acquire land from jamindars or landlords has deep impact on his transformation as a revolutionary singer. His deep anthropological knowledge and introspection on life of tribes and communities living in this region, together with his theoretical studies of dialectical materialism of Marxist ideology, helped him to understand not only the social dynamics, but the root causes of their plight and impoverishment. Such realization and his close association with people as part of his organizational work deeply inspired him, pushed him to transform to a completely different creative person. Indeed, Vishnu Prasad Rabha was a world citizen and he belonged to an ethnic group of this part of the world that have very strong history of a living and colorful cultural tradition. His theoretical studies on dialectical materialism helped him in understanding the relationship between rulers and oppressed. In fact, Vishnu Prasad Rabha was a born communist by nature, and perhaps that is why he could write in his early life, "Rajye ase duiti patha, ekti kalo ekti sada, Rajyer jodi mongol chao, duiti pathai boli dao." His vast knowledge on anthropological studies of these tribes and communities living in this part of the world and his frequent pilgrimages to these places helped him in carrying out his organizational activities as a communist. He could instantly mingle with different tribes and communities, could behave like a fellow community person, could speak flawlessly in their own languages, which was not an easy task because these tribes and communities are so diverse in culture and language. Vishnu Prasad Rabha has this born talent in him, this extraordinary quality, getting the rare opportunities to hide amongst them during his period of underground, camouflaging his identity and simultaneously leading the farmer struggle to end, particularly with slavery. It is amazing to see how he spent his underground period living among these rural people, traveling from here and there while simultaneously carrying out his creative activities. His close association with these people who traditionally inherit very strong culture, yet live in impoverishment and oppression, has deep impact not only on his life and work, but shaping his ideology and creative work. Vishnu Prasad Rabha was deeply associated with politics since his early life. His political activism was devoted to welfare and emancipation of oppressed sections and not for power politics. Like a true revolutionary, his political activism stirred him up to script those immortal and inspiring words that last forever, remains as significant for the voiceless. A revolutionary communist, Vishnu Prasad Rabha always dreamt of a classless society. His political activism made him to work among the poor farmers, and this became a blessing for this creative genius. He struggled against wage slavery of poor farmers, most of whom were landless, and against landlords. But that was not a mere routine political work for Vishnu Prasad Rabha. Life and struggle to meet both ends of these kind-hearted poor farmers, mostly living in isolated pockets, was the true inspiration to carry out his creative work. As part of his organizational work to mobilize peasants for their land rights was not an easy task. Most of these people were illiterate and ignorant of their rights, and this creative genius who took the path of armed struggle had to move on barefoot, remained hungry for days, frequently had to change the shelter bases. There was fear of life in the moment as government announced a bounty on him, but such challenges could not stop him because rural masses amongst whom he worked and took shelter was his constant inspiration. His political speeches were designed with musical compositions and poems that scripted himself from the inspiration of day-to-day life and activities of common people among whom he used to take shelter as part of his political activism. He was a visionary, a great orator, and a great political mobilizer. He could instantly compose songs while delivering political speeches. The words are like swords, because they came out from the deep realization of the struggle of those who actually had nothing to lose but a world to win. These are the words of sweat and blood of those poor farmers. The songs he composed during this phase like Kihor no bhoy ase abhoy bani devotar, Kotorukhu Soupakheroi dhoni jamidar, Puhe kolitar rongate proja dukhiar, ধ্বংসকর ধনির অহংকার দয়া মায়া নকৰিবি ক্ষমাৰ দিন যে গ'ল হাল কোৰডা হাতৰি লৈ ৰণলৈ যাও বল অৰ স্বাধীন চিতিয়া হালুৱা ডেকাৰণুৱা পঞ্চায়তী মনৰে মনুৱা যুঁজিব সমৰত লগৰীয়া বনুৱা were very different from the songs he composed during his early period of life like Nahor Phule Nupuai, Togor Phule Kwabo, and others. These words he scripted this time during his underground period are lively, vibrant, and derived straight from the life and struggle of those rural, poor, and landless farmers who had to survive in sharecrop systems in West slavery. And West slavery was their fate and hardly have any belongings for a better life. Significantly, during this period, he also composed these songs in the languages of those tribes and communities where he used to take shelter. His literary and cultural works were hardly rewarded by government institutions during his lifetime, but the words he scripted have such indomitable strength that they still inspire people and will continue to inspire as the struggle is still on. Thank you. This is my short note on the I think it's time for interaction. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Ratna Rali Talukdar, for your very illuminating speech. Some of the new things I have come to know from your lecture, because I know that Vishnu Prasad Rabha, it is my personal observation, that his works are really related with the socio-cultural anthropology, but about the physical anthropology also he was involved. This is really a new information for me. Thank you for this new information. And I request if have if the participants have any queries, you can ask freely either through the chat box or through the mic also directly. Yeah, connection is very bad. However, if somebody has any query, Pankaj.
বৰ বেয়া শুনিছে বাইদেউ, বাৰে বাৰে মই কথা কৈ থাকিব লগীয়া হৈছে।
অবজাৰভেশ্যন আছে একো নহয় কোৱা। আমি এখন আলোচনা চক্ৰ হয়নে? আমি আলোচনা দিছো কিছুমান নতুন দিশ লৈ পেলাই বিষ্ণুপ্ৰসাদ ৰাভাদেৱৰ। গতিকে
যিহেতু মোক অকমান ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট ইয়াতে মোক ক'ব বিচাৰিছো, যিহেতু মোক অনুৰোধটো অনামিকাৰ পৰা আহিছিল। উইয়াৰ ক্লাছমেট আৰু আমি দুয়ো এন্থ্ৰপলজিৰ হয়, আৰু বিষ্ণুপ্ৰসাদ ৰাভাৰ যি তেওঁৰ নৃতাত্ত্বিক হিচাপে তেওঁৰ যি অৱদান আছে সেই কথাটো আমি প্ৰায় উল্লেখ নকৰো বা উল্লেখ কৰা হোৱা নাই। আৰু মই অনুভৱ কৰো যে যিহেতু তেওঁ এই জাতি জনগোষ্ঠী অসম বা সমগ্ৰ নৰ্থ ইষ্ট ভাৰতৰ বা তাতেই নহয় ভূটান নেপাল এইবিলাকৰো তেওঁ ইমান মানে তেওঁ অকল কিতাপ পত্ৰ পঢ়ি জানিছিলে সেইটো নহয়, তেওঁ নিজে গৈছে সেই ঠাইবিলাকলৈ আৰু মানুহবিলাকক তেওঁ লগ পাইছে। বৰ ইণ্টাৰেষ্টিং কথা যে তেওঁ বহুতো জনগোষ্ঠীৰ লগত তেওঁ তেওঁলোকৰ ভাষাত কথা পাতিব পাৰিছিল। দিছ ইজ এ ভেৰি ৰেয়াৰ কোৱালিটি। আৰু তেওঁ চাইকলজিটো জানিছিল, বিকজ আমি যেতিয়া কমিউনিটিজ বুলি কওঁ তেওঁলোকৰ কিছুমান নিৰ্দিষ্ট চৰিত্ৰ থাকে, লাইক দে ৱান্ট টু লিভ ইন আইচলেশ্যন। তেওঁলোকে অন্য এখন সমাজৰ লগত বৰকে মিক্স আপ কৰিব নোখোজে আৰু তেওঁলোকৰ psychology. Our term of the Marxist ideology to loy গৈছিল. He নৃতাত্ত্বিক অধ্যয়নখিনিয়ে তেওঁ যথেষ্ট পৰিমাণে সহায় কৰিছিল। সেইকাৰণে আমি দেখিছিলো যে why he became such creative, you know. আমি দেখো যে আমি সদায় থিয়ৰিটিকেলি এটা থিয়ৰি লৈ মানুহৰ ওচৰত যাওঁ, বা এতিয়াও আমি দেখিছো যে এটা নিৰ্দিষ্ট আইডিয়লজি আমাৰ চেন্ট্ৰেল গভৰ্ণমেণ্ট আছে, আমাৰ তেওঁলোকৰ কিন্তু ক্ৰিয়েটিভিটি নাই। কিন্তু বিপ্লৱে সেই ক্ৰিয়েটিভিটিখিনি কেনেকে আহৰণ কৰিলে, তেওঁ সেই মানুহখিনিৰ মনস্তত্ব জানিছিল বা তেওঁলোকৰ ভাষা। আৰু এই এতিয়া আপুনি চাব ৰাভাসকলৰ সংস্কৃতি বড়োসকলৰ পৰা সম্পূৰ্ণ পৃথক। হয়তো ক'ৰবাত মিল আছে, কিন্তু ডিষ্টিংটিভনেছটো সদায় থাকে। অনামিকা দৰে জানিব।
Exactly. I would like to add something with you. We have already discussed some of the issues, the ethnographic study that Rabha did through his fictional writings, although he was not trained in anthropology. But I have already referred to the novel called, Missing Koneng, the way he has portrayed the missing way of life, the projection of the river, Kubankhiri. That point we have already discussed in the previous session. Another important dimension that I would like to add with your observation is that if we look at, as you are talking about Rabha, emergence of Rabha as a singer, as a musician, yes, when he was engaged with different kind of tribal communities of Assam, or for that matter, enter Northeast India or Eastern India, there is a different kind of different genre of music what Jyoti Prasad recognized at the Kamrupi Dhara. When we are talking about Indian classical music, we basically refer to the North Indian style and the South Indian style. But it was Jyoti Prasad who identified another, musicological, genre, that is the Kamrupiya Sangit. And that Kamrupiya music is basically, it's predominant by a kind of pentatonic music, jitu Asomiyat ami kau Panchakuriya Sangit. Aru once you look at Rabha's musicological work, Rabha's composition, his tune and all, আমি দেখিবলৈ পাম যে তিলাই তিলাই ঘূৰি ফুৰা খামটি ছোৱালীজনীৰ কথা যেতিয়া তেওঁ কৈছে, এই পাহাৰত প্ৰতিধ্বনিত হোৱা সংগীতৰ সুৰ এটা আহিছে, কুৰুৱা বতাহে, এই এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ এটা যিটো গান আছে, সেই গানটো পাহাৰত প্ৰতিধ্বনিত হোৱা সংগীতৰ এটা পেন্টাটনিক মিউজিকৰ আমি এটা টিউন দেখিবলৈ পাওঁ, যিটো ভূপেন হাজৰিকাৰ এই সংগীতৰ দ্বাৰা সাংঘাতিক ধৰণে অনুপ্ৰাণিত হৈছিলে। আৰু আমি এটা ইনফৰ্মেল ডিছকাশ্যনত এটা কথা শুনিছিলো যে যেতিয়া ভূপেন হাজৰিকাই যেনেকে শ্বিলঙৰে গধূলি গানটো যেতিয়া সুৰ কৰিছিলে, তেতিয়া বিষ্ণুপ্ৰসাদ ৰাভা, ভূপেন হাজৰিকা, লক্ষ্যধৰ চৌধুৰী, এই সকল গোটেইবিলাক স্বনামধন্য ব্যক্তি, অসমৰ পুৰুধা ব্যক্তি একেলগে MLA আছিল শ্বিলঙত। আৰু বিষ্ণুৰাভাৰ যিটো MLA কোৱাৰ্টাৰ আৰু ভূপেন হাজৰিকাৰ কোৱাৰ্টাৰ ওচৰা ওচৰি আছিল, প্ৰথম যিটো সুৰ হৈছিল সেই সুৰটো হেনো বিষ্ণুৰাভাই অকমান ক্ৰিটিচাইজ কৰিছিল যে ভূপেন, এই গানটোত এই শ্বিলঙৰ অনুভৱটো অহা নাই, পেন্টাটনিক পাহাৰীয়া সংগীতৰ যিটো পাহাৰত প্ৰতিধ্বনিত হোৱা সংগীতৰ যিটো অনুভৱ, যিটো সেন্স, সেইটো অহা নাই। ৰাভাই যেতিয়া তাৰ কিছু নতুন দিশ উন্মোচন কৰিলে, তাৰ পিছত লাহে লাহে আন্ধাৰ হল, দূৰণিৰ সেই খাচী গাঁওখনৰ মাজত আমি এটা ইটছ এ মিউজিকলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰপলজিক এথনোগ্ৰাফিক কাইণ্ড অফ ফিল, যিটো আমি ভূপেন হাজৰিকাৰ সংগীতত আমি পৰৱৰ্তী সময়ত দেখিবলৈ পাইছিলো। সেইটো তিৰাপ সীমান্তই হওক বা শ্বিলঙৰে গধূলি হওক বা কটজোৱানৰ মৃত্যু হল, এই অৰুণাচল পাহাৰত গৈ কেতিয়াবা খাচী পাহাৰত গৈ, কেতিয়াবা গাৰো পাহাৰত গৈ ভূপেন হাজৰিকাৰ যিবোৰ গান ৰচনা কৰিছিলে, এই যিটো কৌশল, এই পেন্টাটনিক মিউজিকৰ লগত খেলাৰ যিটো কৌশল, মই ভাবো এইটো নিশ্চয় ডক্টৰ ভূপেন হাজৰিকাই বিষ্ণুৰাভাৰ পৰা শিকিছিলে। আৰু যদিও আমি এন্থ্ৰপলজিকেল পাৰ্সপেক্টিভৰ পৰা, লিটাৰেৰী পাৰ্সপেক্টিভৰ পৰা আমি ৰাভাক বিশ্লেষণ কৰিছো, মই ভাবো ইট ইজ দ্য নিড অফ দ্য আৱাৰ টু এনালাইজ Vishnu Prasad Rabha from a musicological perspective. That's all.
Yes. Yeah, of course, but yeah, definitely. But I have very little knowledge on music. I'm only a listener to good music. So, but what I wanted to say on this paper, that that his anthropological knowledge and his study on dialectical realism both have deep impact on creating such music, like, which we call Gana Sangit, which we may call, Gana Sangit, which is very different from other kind of music,
Right.
He was in underground. He wrote not only songs, but some of his poems, like Hero Krishok Prithibi Prathom Biplobibir Prokritir Kabidarok Dharonir Buku Phali Nangolor Phalduli Bune Bune Toy Lokimik Lovitili. These are very different kind of different realization. And educated অন্যধৰণৰ মিউজিক খিনিৰ পৰা সম্পূৰ্ণ পৃথক আৰু এই বস্তুটো হৈছে যেতিয়া তেওঁ সেই এক্টিভ মানে ৰাজনৈতিকভাৱে তেওঁ যেতিয়া একেবাৰে মানুহৰ লগত সোমাই কাম কৰিছে আৰু সেই সময়খিনি আমি দেখিছিলো কেনেকৈ তেওঁ খালি ভৰি এখন ঠাইৰ পৰা এখন ঠাইলৈ ঘূৰি ফুৰে, কাৰণ পুলিচ মিলিটাৰী চকু থাকে আৰু তেওঁ এটা ঠাইত বেছি দিন থাকিব নোৱাৰে, হয়তো কেইবাদিনো ধৰি খাবলৈ পোৱা নাই সেই মানুহবিলাক, আৰু ইমান বেছি ইগনৰেণ্ট এণ্ড ইলিটাৰেট। আমি প্ৰেগনেণ্টৰ কেইটামান শব্দ শুনিলে মোৰ এতিয়াও ভৰি যায় যে তেওঁ আসন দিছে আৰু মানুহবিলাকক সুধিছে, বুজিলি নে? বুজিলো। কি বুজিলি? তই যিটো কলি সেইটো বুজিলো। তেতিয়াহ'লে মই কি কৰিলো? তই যিটো কলি সেইটো তইহে জান। They were so ignorant. আৰু তেওঁ কাম কৰিছে, they were the inspirations. Like আমি যেতিয়া এইটো সময়ত আমি যেতিয়া বিষ্ণুৰাভাক চাওঁ, আমি সেই এজন ভিনচেণ্ট ভেন গগক আমি মনত পেলাব পাৰো, এজন চে গুয়েভাৰাক আমি মনত পেলাব পাৰো, and he had that capability. আমি তেওঁক কিন্তু আজি বিষ্ণুৰাভাই কৰি ৰাখিছো, আমি অসমতে ৰাখিছো, আমি কিন্তু তেওঁক মানে ট্ৰান্সলেটিং হিজ ৱৰ্ক আমি কিন্তু সেইবিলাকলৈ নিব পৰা নাই। আমাৰ এইটো এটা হেৰি যে আমি কেতিয়াও লাৰ্কা বা লাৰ্কাৰ দৰে কবিসকলৰ কথা কওঁ, বা আমি সেই তানজানিয়াৰ সেই মহিলাক মই নামটো এতিয়া পাহৰি গৈছো, বি কিটু দে বুলি কওঁ, তেওঁলোক বহুত স্মল, দে বিলং টু ভেৰি স্মল কমিউনিটিজ, বাট তেওঁলোকে কিন্তু ট্ৰান্সলেশ্যনৰ জৰিয়তে ৱৰ্ল্ড ৰাইড কৰা তেওঁলোক গুচি গৈছে। But we have such an amazing personality like Vishnu Rabha, who was a burnt communist, who was so creatively restless throughout his life. আৰু মানুহৰ মাজত লঘোণে বুকে থাকি বছৰৰ পিছত বছৰ ধৰি কাম কৰিছে, যাৰ কোনো আপত্তি নাছিল এই কামটোৰ কাৰণে। He took inspirations from তেওঁলোকৰ যি simplicity, তেওঁলোকৰ যি মৰম চেনেহ, তাৰ পৰা এই ধৰণৰ শব্দবিলাক তেওঁ সৃষ্টি কৰি গৈছে। ত' আমি যদি সেই কথাবিলাক পাহৰি যাওঁ, বা আমি যদি তেওঁ গোটেইখিনি মিউজিক একেলগে কৰি পেলাওঁ, পৰজনমত শুভ লগনত, বা নহয় জানো, তেওঁৰ এইখিনি মিউজিক সম্পূৰ্ণ বেলেগ। আমি সম্পূৰ্ণ দুটা ধাৰাৰ মিউজিক আছে, এইখিনি আমি গণসংগীত বুলিয়ে ক'ব পাৰো, নহয় জানো ডক্টৰ অনামিকা দৰ? আপোনাৰো কিছু হেৰি আছে। So I think we should have more discussions on these aspects, like কিয়নো তেওঁ এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ এটা লিভিং এনচাইক্লোপেডিয়া, আৰু তাৰ কাৰণে তেওঁ প্ৰস্তুতি কি ধৰণৰ আছিল। আমি সাধাৰণতে ভাবো যে he was a যাযাবৰ kind of, no, he was a vagabond, যাযাবৰী এজন অস্থিৰ শিল্পী, but it is not. It is actually not. He was a trained anthropologist. He was a trained communist. সেইটোৱে তেওঁ কিন্তু সেই জীৱনৰ শেষ মুহূৰ্তলৈকে it makes him, it made him uncompromising. আৰু সেইকাৰণে তেওঁ সদায় বিষ্ণু ৰাভা হৈ থাকিল। That is why he is Vishnu Rabha. সেইকাৰণে তেওঁক চৰকাৰে ভয় কৰিলে, পঘা লগাই চুচুৰাই নিলে, দুবাৰকৈ জেলত দিলে, বাট ষ্টিল আমি আজি ইমান লিডিং এডুকেশ্যন ইনষ্টিটিউশ্যন, আৰ্য বিদ্যাপীঠ কলেজৰ দৰে গুৱাহাটী মহানগৰী বুকুত এখন লিডিং ইনষ্টিটিউশ্যনত আমি আজি দুদিনীয়া আলোচনা চক্ৰ আমি বিষ্ণু ৰাভাৰ ওপৰত পাতিছো। Why? Because these words are very relevant. আৰু আমি এই কথাবিলাক পাতিব লাগিব, কোনখিনিত তেওঁ কমিউনিষ্ট বিষ্ণু ৰাভাজন আছে, কোনখিনিত অন্য বিষ্ণু ৰাভাজন আছে, যিজন তেজে মঙহে আছে এজন সম্পূৰ্ণ বিষ্ণু ৰাভা, নহয় জানো? আৰু আমি সেই তেজে মঙহে মানুহজনৰ কথা ইমান বেছিকে পাতো যে আমি এই যে যিজন এজন ট্ৰু এন্থ্ৰপলজি, আজি আমি ৰুলি অনামিকা দুৱৰা আমি সকলো এন্থ্ৰপলজি ষ্টুডেণ্ট আছিলো, কিন্তু আমি কেতিয়াও আমাৰ এন্থ্ৰপলজি পাঠ্যক্ৰমত আমি ভূপেন হাজৰিকাৰ নাম পোৱা নাই। আমি বেৰিয়াৰ এলুইন পঢ়িলো, আমি কিমান বাহিৰৰ এন্থ্ৰপলজিষ্টসকলৰ থিয়ৰীবিলাক পঢ়িলো, আমি ভূপেন হাজৰিকা নপঢ়িলো, আমি বিষ্ণু ৰাভা নপঢ়িলো, অথচ তেওঁলোকে গৈ যথেষ্ট কাম কৰি থৈছে। ত' আই থিংক এই নতুন চিন্তা চৰ্চাবোৰ গ'লে আমি দেখাই ময়ূৰ বৰাই কৈছে যে এইবিলাকৰ প্ৰাসংগিকতা ক'ত আছে, যেতিয়া আমি নতুন নতুন দিশবিলাক আমি উন্মোচন কৰিম। আই থিংক দেট ইজ ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট। থেংক ইউ।
হয়, সঁচা হেৰি হয় ৰত্না ভৰালী। আমি একচুৱেলি এজন এন্থ্ৰপলজিষ্ট হ'বৰ কাৰণে তেওঁ ট্ৰেইন হ'ব নালাগে, তেওঁৰ ডিগ্ৰী নালাগে, ডিগ্ৰী নালাগে তেওঁ নিজে ভূপেন হাজৰিকাৰ কথাই কওঁ বা মই বিষ্ণুপ্ৰসাদ ৰাভাদেৱৰ কথাই কওঁ তেওঁলোকে মানে ইনবৰ্ন যেন এগৰাকী এন্থ্ৰপলজিষ্ট তেওঁলোকে নিজেই ফিল্ডলৈ গৈ সেই হেৰিবিলাক সমলবিলাক বুটলি আনি সব সামৰি সুতৰি আনি তেওঁলোকে আকৌ এটা নতুন
নহয় এতিয়া আমাৰ কি হয় আজিকালি সময়ত কি হয় যে এজন সিংগাৰ যায় তেওঁলোকৰ কিবা এটা কালচাৰেল এলিমেন্ট লৈ আহে কিন্তু তেওঁলোকে মানুহৰ জীৱনটো তুলি আনিছে why Bishnava is different why Bhupen Hazarika is different তেওঁলোকে তেতে মঙহে সেই গোটেই বস্তুটো তুলি আনিছে নহয় জানো
হয় হয়
এই পাৰ্থক্যটো আমি জানিব লাগিব এই পাৰ্থক্যটো ইজ নট ফৰ গ্লেমাৰ কাৰণ মানুহৰ জীৱনৰ
গ্লেমাৰৰ কাৰণে তেওঁলোকে কৰা নাছিল
ভূপেন হাজৰিকাই কৰা নাছিল কাৰণ আমি জানো যে পবিত্ৰ অনুভূতিবোৰ যে সদায় দুখৰ যেতিয়া আমি মিউজিকৰ কথা কম সদায় তাত মানুহৰ তেজে মঙহে দুখটো থাকিব লাগিব ষ্ট্ৰাগল থাকিব লাগিব আৰু ভূপেন হাজৰিকাইও সেই কামটো কৰিছে যেতিয়া তেওঁ ৰংমনৰ কথা ক'লে তেওঁ সেই মাছমৰী এজনৰ ষ্ট্ৰাগলটোৰ কথা ক'লে নহয় জানো
হয় এইখিনিতে আপোনালৈ এটা হেৰি প্ৰশ্ন আহিছে ৰাভাক কিয় সৈনিক শিল্পী বুলি কোৱা হয় বাইদেউ আপোনাৰ দৃষ্টিভংগী জনাবচোন ডক্টৰ অৰ্চনা দেৱীয়ে এই প্ৰশ্নটো আগবঢ়াইছে
এইটো কথা খুবেই ভাল লাগে সৈনিক শিল্পী তেওঁ যেতিয়া অৱশ্যে আমি নাজানো যে হাতত এখন হাতত অস্ত্ৰ তুলি লোৱাটো মানে কিমান দূৰ প্ৰাসংগিক আছিল কাৰণ তেওঁ যিখন সমাজত কমিউনিজমৰ ভাৱধাৰালৈ তেওঁ যিখন সমাজৰ মাজত কাম কৰিবলৈ গুচি গ'ল মই কৈছোঁ যে মানুহখিনি ইমানেই নিৰক্ষৰ ইমানেই ইগনৰেণ্ট অজ্ঞ যে তেওঁলোকে বিষ্ণুভাই কি কৈছে সেই কথাখিনিও নাজানে যে আবয়ে কৈছে এইটোহে ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট কি কৈছে বা কি কৈছে এইটো তেওঁলোকৰ কাৰণে ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট নহয় কথাখিনি কোৱাৰ পাছত বিষ্ণুভাই গান এটা গাব মোক এটা গানকো শিকাই দিবি কোনোবাই কয় মোক এটা নাচকো শিকাই দিবি তেনেকুৱা এখন সমাজত বিষ্ণুভাই হাতত ষ্টেন গানটো লৈ কিয় গুচি গৈছিল তেওঁ ভাবি এইটো কিমান প্ৰাসংগিক আছিল যে সমাজৰ জানো তেনেকৈ পৰিৱৰ্তন এটা কৰিব পৰা গ'লহেঁতেন বা সেই ডিজায়াৰ্ড যিটো ইচ্ছিত লক্ষ্য যে ক্লাছলেছ ছ'চাইটি শ্ৰেণীবিহীন সংগ্ৰাম সেইটো কিমান দূৰ সফল হ'লহেঁতেন সেইটো আমি নাজানো বাট ইট ইজ হিজ বিলিভ যে তেওঁ ভাবিছিলে যে সাধাৰণ মানুহে আমি ইণ্ডিয়াৰ পলিটিকেল ইণ্ডিপেণ্ডেন্সটো আমি পালো বাট ইকনমিক ইণ্ডিপেণ্ডেন্স ক'ত জমিদাৰৰ হাতত মাটি থাকি গ'ল জমিদাৰে ৰাইটৰ পৰা কুক কৰি মাটি লৈ যায় জমিদাৰ সদায় 500-600 বিঘা 1000 বিঘা মাটিৰ মালিক আমি নিজেই জানো বিষ্ণু ৰাভা 2500 বিঘাৰ মাটিৰ মালিক আছিল তেওঁ তেজপুৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত তেওঁলোকে সেই মাটিখিনি তেজপুৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি য'ত থিয় হৈ আছে সেয়া বিষ্ণু ৰাভাৰ পৰিয়ালৰ মাটি তেওঁলোক ইমান ডাঙৰ ডাঙৰ জমিদাৰৰ মানুহ আছিল যে সেই মাটিখিনি আচলতে কাৰ যে ৰাইটৰ কিন্তু সেই মানুহখিনিয়ে কিন্তু মাটি যদি নাপায় সেইকাৰণে তেওঁ কৈছিল যে হাল যাৰ মাটি তাত নাঙল যাৰ মাটি তাত গতিকে সেই মানুহখিনিক তেওঁ হয়তো ভাবিছিল যে আৰ্ম ষ্ট্ৰাগল হাতত ষ্টেন গান লৈহে তেওঁ পাৰিব আৰু এই বস্তুটো যে আমি ভাৰতবৰ্ষৰ যি ভাৰতৰ ৰাষ্ট্ৰযন্ত্ৰ ফৰ্মেলি এই কথাবিলাক ক'বলৈ বহুত দিগদাৰ দেশ বুলি ক'লে আমি মানুহৰ মৰম চেনেহৰ কথা বুজি পাওঁ আমি আজি উত্তৰ প্ৰদেশলৈকে যাওঁ বা পাঞ্জাৱলৈকে যাওঁ দেশ বুলি ক'লে আমি দেশৰ মানুহৰ মৰম চেনেহৰ কথা বুজি পাওঁ কিন্তু ৰাষ্ট্ৰযন্ত্ৰ বুলি আমি যেতিয়া কৈ দিওঁ সি বৰ নিষ্ঠুৰ আৰু এই ৰাষ্ট্ৰযন্ত্ৰই তেওঁলোকৰ আন্দোলনটো কেনেদৰে শেষ কৰিলে আৰু আমি পিছৰ সময়তো দেখিছো ভাৰত মানে অসমৰ বা নৰ্থ ইষ্টৰ উত্তৰ পূব ভাৰতৰ আমাৰ যি জনগোষ্ঠীয় যি আশা আকাংক্ষাবোৰ আছিল সেইবোৰ কিমান কুটিল চক্ৰান্তৰে তেওঁলোকে মহিমূৰ কৰি পেলাইছে আজি তেওঁলোকে হয়তো যিবিলাক শান্তি চুক্তি বা এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ কথাবোৰ হৈছে দুজনমানে ক্ষমতা পাইছে সাধাৰণ মানুহৰ একো হোৱা নাই নহ'লেনো এই আমি অলপতে শুনিলো যে কাৰ্বি আংলঙত লংকাৰ মানে বন কৰা ছোৱালী ৰেপ হ'ল অসমীয়া মানুহৰ মাজত থকা এগৰাকী জনগোষ্ঠীয় ছোৱালী কিয় হ'ল কিয় হ'বলৈ পালে আজি ভাৰতবৰ্ষ ইমান দিন ইমান স্বাধীনতা 70 বছৰ পাৰ হৈ গ'ল কিন্তু বিষ্ণু ৰাভাৰ অন্তৰত সেই বিশ্বাসটো আছিল আমি সেই বিশ্বাসটোক সন্মান কৰিবই লাগিব এজন মানুহে এখন বা এমুঠিমান মানুহে ভাৰতবৰ্ষৰ দৰে এখন শক্তিশালী ৰাষ্ট্ৰক প্ৰত্যাহ্বান জনায় হাতত ষ্টেন গান লৈ মানুহৰ মাজত বিপ্লৱ কৰিবলৈ গুচি গৈছে এই অনুভূতিটো আমি কিন্তু সন্মান কৰিবই লাগিব আৰু তাত কোনো ভেজাল নাছিল তাত কোনো ধৰণৰ কম্প্ৰমাইজ নাছিল বৰ্তমানৰ যিবিলাক আমি সংগ্ৰামত দেখা পাওঁ যে নেতৃত্বৰ যি কম্প্ৰমাইজিং এটিটিউড সেইবিলাক তাত নাছিল আৰু নাছিল কাৰণে বিষ্ণু ভাই কিন্তু সেই ইনস্পিৰেশ্যনখিনি তেওঁ সাধাৰণ মানুহৰ পৰা পালে এতিয়াও যদি আপোনালোকে যদি বুন্দাপাৰা বকু বা গোৱালপাৰা এৰিয়া এইবিলাকত যায় য'ত বিষ্ণু ভাই মিটিং কৰিছিল তাৰ মানুহবিলাকে কিন্তু বৰ আচৰিত ধৰণে বিষ্ণু ভাইৰ কথা কয় তেওঁৰ বন্দুকটো কিন্তু তেওঁলোকে সমীহ কৰে আৰু এই সমীহটো আমি কিন্তু শ্ৰদ্ধা কৰিবই লাগিব মানুহৰ আৰু সেইকাৰণেই তেওঁ সৈনিক শিল্পী তেওঁ সৈনিক তেওঁ হাতত বন্দুক লৈছে কিন্তু বিষ্ণু ভাই নৰহত্যা কৰাৰ কথা শুনা নাই কিন্তু হয় তেওঁ বহুতে ডকাইত বুলি কৈছে কবই সুবিধাবাদীবিলাকেতো ডকাইত বুলি কবই কিন্তু তেওঁ পৰুৱা এটা মৰাৰ কথাও আমি শুনা নাই এইবিলাক আছিল প্ৰতীক সংগ্ৰামৰ প্ৰতীকহে আছিল আৰু অতি হেৰি সময়ত হয়তো অসমত বন্দুকৰ ব্যৱহাৰ হৈছে নোহোৱাও নহয় সেই সময়ত RCPI মুভমেণ্টত মই সঠিক ইমান RCPI মুভমেণ্টত ষ্টাডি কৰা নাই কিন্তু আমি যদি বিষ্ণু ভাইৰ জীৱন আৰু সেইবিলাক চাওঁ তাত কিন্তু আমি কেতিয়াও বন্দুকৰ ব্যৱহাৰ দেখা নাপাওঁ তেওঁলোকৰ হাতত বন্দুক আছে আৰু বিষ্ণু ভাইৰ হাতত বন্দুক আছে আৰু কলম আছে আৰু এতিয়া এগৰাকী লেখক হিচাপে মই সদায় অনুভৱ কৰোঁ যে আমি কলমত বন্দুকৰ গুলি ভৰাই আমি লিখিব লাগিব আমি কলমত বন্দুকৰ গুলি ভৰাই লিখিব পৰা নাই কাৰণেইতো আজি ইমানখিনি সমস্যা এতিয়াও হৈ আছে যে এই মানুহখিনি এতিয়াও আজি জনজাতীয় মানুহখিনিৰ মাজত এইটো মাতি নাই চৰকাৰে কৈ উচ্ছেদ হৈছে বিভিন্ন ডিস্কোৰ্চ ওলাই যায় যে ধৰ্মীয় বা অন্য ধৰণৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কিন্তু আপুনি পৰিসংখ্যা চাওক কাৰ হাতৰ পৰা মাটি গুচি গৈছে জনজাতীয় মানুহৰ পৰাই মাটি গুচি গৈছে নহয় জানো তাৰমানে বিষ্ণু ভাই কিন্তু সেই বস্তুটো আমাক মানে সেই আদৰ্শটো আমাক দেখুৱাই থৈছে যে তেওঁৰ ষ্টেণ্ডাৰ্ডটো আমি এতিয়াও কিন্তু প্ৰতিকী অৰ্থত ল'ব পাৰোঁ আৰু অন্ততঃ মই এইটো বিশ্বাস কৰিবলৈ লৈছো যে যেতিয়া মই কলমেৰে লিখিম মোৰ কলমত কিন্তু মই বন্দুকৰ গুলি সোমোৱাইহে লিখিম অৰ্থাৎ মোৰ শব্দবোৰৰ সেই শক্তিটো হ'ব লাগিব বা মোৰ সেই প্ৰচেছটো থাকিব লাগিব মোৰ সেই সাধনাটো থাকিব লাগিব যে প্ৰত্যেকটো শব্দই যেন বন্দুকৰ গুলিৰ দৰে অব্যৰ্থ হৈ যায় ইট ইজ এন এক্সাৰচাইজ এইটো এক্সাৰচাইজ আমি কৰা নাই বিষ্ণু ভাই সেইকাৰণেই সৈনিক শিল্পী তেওঁ কিন্তু কৰিব পাৰিলে তেওঁ ক'লে ধ্বংস কৰ ধনীৰ অহংকাৰ আজিও আমি এইটো গান গাই আমি ইনস্পায়াৰ হওঁ আমি অনুপ্ৰেৰণা পাওঁ আজি কৰোণাৰ সময়ত আকৌ এই কথাবোৰ দাৰ্শনিকভাৱে আহিছে আমি কি লৈ যাম চকুৰ আগত আমাৰ ইমান ধনী ধনী মানুহবোৰ মৰি গৈছে মৰমৰ বন্ধু বান্ধৱ মৰি গৈছে এতিয়া আমাৰ মনলৈ দাৰ্শনিক ধৰণে আহিছে কিন্তু বিষ্ণু ভাই তাত্ত্বিকভাৱে কৈছে যে নাঙল যাৰ মাটি তাৰ নহয় জানো গতিকে এই কথাখিনিৰ গভীৰ অৰ্থত আৰু ইট ইজ অলৱেজ ৰিলেভেণ্ট মই ভাবো অন্ততঃ মই বিশ্বাস মোৰ দৰে হয়তো বহুতেই ভাবে এই কথাটো যে পৃথিৱীৰ শেষত একেবাৰে শেষ মমেণ্টলৈকে যেতিয়া এজন ভূমিহীন কৃষক থাকিব এজন বঞ্চিত কৃষক থাকিব এজন শ্ৰমিক থাকিব যাৰ হাতৰ পৰা মাটি কাহিনী ৰামদেৱৰ নিচিনা মাফিয়া হাতত তুলি দিয়া হৈছে সেই মানুহজন থকালৈকে কিন্তু বিষ্ণু ভাই প্ৰাসংগিক হৈ থাকিব কাৰণ সেই খেতিয়কজনে এই গানটো শুনিবলৈ ভাল পাব ধ্বংস কৰ ধনীৰ অহংকাৰ কাৰণ তেওঁৰ পৰা মাটি কাহিনী সেই ধনীৰ হাতত তুলি দিয়া হৈছে নহয় জানো সেইকাৰণে বিষ্ণু ভাই সৈনিক শিল্পী তেওঁৰ হাতত বন্দুক তুলি লৈছিলে আপুনি মই এইটো সমৰ্থন কৰোঁ নকৰোঁ বুলি কয় বাট ইট ৱাজ হিজ বিলিভ এণ্ড তেওঁ ইয়াৰ পৰা ইনস্পায়াৰ হৈছিলে তাৰ পৰা তেওঁ সেই বন্দুকৰ দৰে শব্দবোৰ সৃষ্টি কৰিলে আৰু আমি আচৰিত লাগে যে তেওঁ মিটিঙৰ মাজতে এটা ৰাজনৈতিক ভাষণ দি থকাৰ মাজতেই তেওঁ এই গানবিলাক ইনষ্টেণ্টলি আহি যায় ইমান বেছি তেওঁ অনুপ্ৰেৰণা পাইছিলে দেট ইজ ৱাই আই থিংক সেইকাৰণে তেওঁ সৈনিক শিল্পী যিটো আমি ক'ব পৰা নাই এতিয়াও আমি মানুহৰ মাজলৈ যাবলৈ বেয়া পাওঁ ফিল্ড ৱৰ্ক কৰিবলৈ বেয়া পাওঁ আমি সদায় ছেকেণ্ডাৰী আমাৰ ডাটা ইনফৰমেশ্যন আমি গাঁওবিলাকত যাব বেয়া পাওঁ নহয় জানো কিন্তু বিষ্ণু ভাই আমাক কৈছে যে নহয় মানুহৰ মাজলৈ যাবা তেওঁলোকৰ ভাষাৰে কথা পাতিবা আমি বিষ্ণু ভাইৰ ৰচনাৱলী যেতিয়া পঢ়ো ইমান যে তাত এটা ডাঙৰ মানে এটা মানে জটিল ঠাইতো তেওঁ নিলিখে মানে মৃত্যু শব্দটো তেওঁ মৰণ লোক বুলিহে কৈছে ইমান সহজ সৰল ভাষাৰে তেওঁ কৈছে আৰু ইমান ডাঙৰ ডাঙৰ কথাবোৰ কৈছে ত' আই থিংক সেইটোৱেই তেওঁৰ সৈনিক শিল্পী হোৱাৰ সাৰ্থকতা থেংক ইউ
হয় ধন্যবাদ ৰত্না ভৰালী তালুকদাৰ ইমান সুন্দৰকৈ গোটেইখিনি আপুনি আগবঢ়াই দিলে সকলোলৈ Thank you so much for your very thought-provoking and illuminating lecture. And now I request Deji Rani Hajorika, the Assistant Professor of the Department of Geography of Arya Vidyapeeth College and as well as the reporter of this webinar, to offer the formal vote of thanks to Ratna Bharalita, Dr. Daisy, are you here?
Okay. So ma'am.
Hi.
First of all, I take this opportunity on behalf of the entire institute, Arya Vidyapeeth College, to thank you, ma'am, Ratna ma'am. Khub bhal lagile apnar kotha shuni pele, and it was really very insightful, and the dynamic personality that he was, Vishnu Prasad Rabha. Iman bur kotha tekhetor gom palu apunar pora je teor nation and his relationship with anthropology, how he loved to do the work himself and then give us insights on those on the things that he would love to study. It was really insightful, ma'am. I can take this opportunity to thank you all for joining us. And I also would like to say that, ma'am, apunar logot ami ako kotha and even in the near future, also, we would like to hear from you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deji. Thank you, Ratna. I am very much really thankful to you. Both Mayur and Mayur, I think Mayur ase, yes, Mayur ase, Mayur aru Ratna, do you? মই সঁচাকে মই এতিয়া ইনফৰ্মেলি কৈছো যে মই সঁচাকে খুব কৃতজ্ঞ আজি আমাৰ এই সেকেন্ড হাফৰ যিটো সাধাৰণতে হয় সেকেন্ড হাফৰ আফটাৰ লাঞ্চটো মানুহৰ অলপমান টোপনি ধৰে হেৰি কৰে, কিন্তু আজি সেইটো হোৱা নাই। আজি বৰঞ্চ বহুত বেছি উচ্চ খাপৰ কিছুমান গধুৰ চিন্তা এই আমাৰ পিছৰ সেকেন্ড সেশনটো পাৰ হৈ গৈছে। আৰু তাৰ বাবে মই দুয়োগৰাকী বক্তালৈকে ময়ূৰ বৰা ৰত্না দুয়োলোকে অতি কৃতজ্ঞতাৰে ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছো, আন্তৰিকতাৰে ধন্যবাদ আৰু কৃতজ্ঞতা জ্ঞাপন কৰিছো। আৰু ভৱিষ্যতলৈ আপোনালোকক আমাৰ মাজত লগ পোৱাৰ সদায় আশা ৰাখিলো। এইখিনিয়ে কৈ আমি আজিৰ কাৰ্যসূচী ইমানতে সমাপ্ত কৰিব বিচাৰিছো। আৰু আজি ইয়াত অংশগ্ৰহণ কৰা প্ৰত্যেকগৰাকী অংশগ্ৰহণকাৰীলৈ মই কৃতজ্ঞতা আৰু ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছো। আৰু আমাৰ ইয়াত উপস্থিত সকলোকে ধন্যবাদ জনাই আজিৰ এই অনুষ্ঠান ইমানতে সামৰিছো। Adilu.
বাইদেউ
অহাকালি আকৌ ৰাতিপুৱা আমি 10টা বজাৰ আগে
আমাৰ কমিটিৰ মেম্বাৰ খিনিক অকমান ৰবলৈ দিয়ক।
আমাৰ